Billionaire Richard Morrison would never have imagined that his daughter would awaken from an inexplicable coma through a simple broth prepared by the calloused hands of the woman he had publicly humiliated just a week before. In the cold corridor of St. Monica's Hospital, the echo of Helena Spencer's tears still reverberated in his memories like a persistent ghost. She carried her small satchel of homemade spices with the same dignity with which she had endured the muffled laughter of high society that fateful night. Her hands trembled imperceptibly, not from nervousness, but from an ancestral energy that pulsed in her veins whenever she approached someone in need of healing. The 28-year-old chef had grown up in the narrow alleys of the outskirts, where her grandmother, Antonia, had taught her more than traditional recipes. Among clay pots and wood-fired stoves, the elder had passed on secrets that transcended common cooking, knowledge that Helena guarded like a sacred treasure. Even when the modern world insisted on discrediting everything that could not be explained by science. Her fingers slid over the strap of the satchel, recalling the weight of the scornful look Richard had cast upon her that gala night. Allowing someone dressed like a priest to cook for this party is an affront to our standards, he had declared, before 300 distinguished guests, while Helena remained silent, holding a platter of rice with pot roast that carried memories of 3 generations of her family. The 42-year-old magnate, owner of an empire that spanned from cutting-edge technology to luxury real estate, could not understand why a young woman would choose to wear long skirts in an era of fashion freedom. To him, Helena represented everything he detested: backwardness, superstition, the refusal to conform to the standards of an evolved society. His sharp wit and relentless ambitions had built a wall between him and any form of vulnerability, despite his wife had died in an accident 3 years prior, leaving him alone to raise Isabella. Now, walking through the sterilized corridors of the city's most expensive hospital, Helena felt the weight of irony. The same man who had publicly humiliated her had knelt before her 2 days earlier, pleading with her to save his 7-year-old daughter, who had been in a coma for 4 days with no apparent medical explanation. The country's best specialists had examined Isabella, performing costly tests and applying experimental treatments, but the girl remained lost in a deep sleep that no conventional medicine could break. Memory transported her to that Thursday afternoon when Richard had appeared at her humble home in Hope Village, his eyes red and his wounded pride hanging on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had knocked on the peeling wooden door with an urgency that contrasted with his usual posture of superiority, and when Helena opened it, she found a man completely different from the arrogant magnate she had known. "I need your help," he had murmured, the words struggling to leave his throat. "My daughter, the doctors don't know what to do anymore." Helena watched him in silence for long seconds, seeing beyond the facade of power. In Richard's brown eyes, she saw the same despair she had seen so many times on the faces of mothers who sought her grandmother in difficult times, when pharmacy medicines were not enough and they had to resort to ancestral wisdom. "Why me?" she had asked, her voice calm, contrasting with the trembling in his hands. "Because," Richard swallowed hard, fighting against each word, "because I heard you have a gift, that your food works miracles." She did not answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes and allowed the memory of grandmother Antonia to take over her mind. The old woman always said that true healing came not only from the ingredients, but from the pure intention of the one who prepared the food, from the faith placed in every pinch of salt, in every movement of the wooden spoon. "Child," her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, "when someone comes to you with a broken heart, it doesn't matter how many times they've hurt you before. What matters is that you hold the power to heal in your hands, and that power doesn't belong to you, it belongs to something greater." Now, before the door of room 412, Helena took a deep breath and adjusted her long navy blue skirt, the same one she had worn on the night of the gala dinner. Not out of defiance or stubbornness, but because that outfit represented her connection to her roots, to the wisdom that ran in her blood like a sacred river. She turned the doorknob and entered the room where Isabella's life hung between two worlds. The room was a temple of medical technology, with monitors that emitted constant beeps and machines that monitored every heartbeat of the girl. Isabella lay motionless on the hospital bed, her blonde hair spread over the white pillow like imprisoned sunbeams. Her breathing was so shallow that it barely moved her chest, and her skin had a pallor that made Helena's heart ache. Richard was sitting in an armchair beside the bed, his expensive clothes crumpled after days of vigil. When he saw Helena enter, he stood up quickly, his eyes oscillating between hope and skepticism. "You came," he said, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "I didn't come for you," Helena replied, walking directly to the bed. Helena placed the satchel on the bedside table and opened it carefully. Inside, organized in small glass containers, were the treasures she had inherited from her grandmother: ginseng roots grown in the backyard, chamomile petals harvested during the waxing moon, cinnamon sticks brought from the countryside, fresh basil growing in her home garden, and dozens of other ingredients that modern medicine had forgotten, but which her female lineage had preserved through the centuries. "What are you going to do?" Richard asked, observing her every move. "I'm going to prepare something your daughter needs," Helena replied, beginning to separate the ingredients. "But first, I need to understand what's consuming her from within." She approached the bed and, with infinite delicacy, placed her hand on Isabella's forehead. She closed her eyes and allowed her intuition to guide her, as she had learned to do since childhood. Through touch, she felt the girl's energy, perceived a deep sadness lodged in her small heart, a pain that was not physical but emotional. "She feels your absence," Helena murmured, still with her eyes closed. "Not from the mother who passed away, but yours. She feels that you distanced yourself from her after you started working more, that you used work as a shield to avoid facing your own pain." Richard recoiled as if he had been punched in the stomach. "That's absurd. I work to give her the best." "You work not to feel," Helena corrected, opening her eyes and looking directly at him. "And she absorbed your sadness, your loneliness. Children do that. They take their parents' pain upon themselves because they believe they can heal them that way." For a moment, silence dominated the room, interrupted only by the constant beep of the monitors. Richard sat heavily in the armchair, his face in his hands. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the weight of the truth Helena had just revealed. "Then how do I bring her back?" he asked, his voice choked. "First, I'll prepare the broth that will nourish her body. Then you will nourish her soul," Helena replied, already arranging the ingredients on the small table. "There's a small kitchen at the end of the hall. I need fire, not a microwave." 40 minutes later, Helena stood before the stove in the hospital's small kitchen, slowly stirring a pot of broth that emanated an indescribable aroma. It was as if all the spices danced in harmony, creating an olfactory symphony that made anyone passing through the corridor stop and smile unconsciously. Richard observed her every move, fascinated by the ritualistic precision with which Helena handled each ingredient. She didn't just cook, she performed an ancient ceremony, whispering words in a language he didn't understand, but which his soul recognized as prayers for healing. "My grandmother taught me that food is the first medicine," Helena explained, without stopping stirring the broth. "She said that when we prepare something with true love, we put our own vital energy into the food. And when someone consumes that energy, they absorb not only the nutrients, but also the intention of the one who prepared it." "Do you really believe that?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. "I believe there are mysteries that science has not yet been able to explain," Helena replied. "I believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that it can manifest in ways that defy our understanding." She tasted the broth with a small wooden spoon and nodded, satisfied. "It's ready." Back in the room, Helena poured the golden broth into a white porcelain cup. The liquid steamed gently. releasing an aroma that involuntarily brought tears to Richard's eyes. Something in that smell awakened old memories, recollections of his poor childhood, when his own mother prepared homemade soups on cold winter nights. "Before we give this to her," Helena said, extending the cup to Richard, "you need to taste it." "Why?" "Because that way you'll understand what you're offering your daughter. You'll feel the intention behind each ingredient." Richard took the cup with trembling hands and brought it to his lips. The first sip was a revelation. The taste was earthy and comforting, like a hug that warmed from the stomach to the soul. But more than that, he felt something indefinable, an energy that coursed through his body like waves of warmth and peace. Tears rolled down his face uncontrollably. At that moment, he saw himself again as the 8-year-old boy who had lost his father and sought refuge in his mother's kitchen, where she prepared daily miracles with simple ingredients and much love. "Now you understand," murmured, seeing the transformation in his eyes. "Now you can give this to her." Richard approached his daughter's bed and with infinite delicacy began to give small sips of the broth to Isabella's pale lips. At first, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, he noticed that her breathing became deeper, more regular. "Talk to her," Helena instructed. "Tell her what you feel. Tell her what you've kept in your heart all these months." Richard hesitated for a moment, then leaned close to his daughter's ear. "Isabella, my princess, Daddy's here. Daddy is so sorry for distancing himself, so sorry for letting work take your place. You are the most important thing in my life, my love, more important than any company, any money, anything in this world." His voice broke, but he continued. "I know you miss Mommy. I miss her too, but she wouldn't want us to lose each other. She would want us to be happy together, to create beautiful new memories." And then, as if responding to a silent call, Isabella's eyelids trembled, first lightly, then with more force. A deep sigh escaped her lips, and slowly, very slowly, she opened her eyes. "Daddy?" Her voice was a fragile whisper, but it was the most beautiful thing Richard had ever heard. "I'm here, my love. I'm here." I held her small hand, kissing it repeatedly. "I won't distance myself any more. I promise." Helena watched the scene with tears in her eyes, knowing that she had witnessed something that transcended any medical explanation. She began to organize her ingredients, preparing to leave discreetly, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Wait," he said, still holding his daughter's hand. I need to talk to you." Isabella had fallen back asleep, but now it was a natural, restorative sleep. The monitors showed stable vital signs, and a gentle smile shone on her rosy lips. "Thank you," Richard said, the words coming with difficulty. "Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for saving me, too." Helena nodded silently, closing her satchel. "I want to compensate you," Richard continued. "I want to offer you a job, head of nutrition for my company, philanthropic projects, a salary that will change your life forever." Helena stopped arranging the ingredients and looked at him. "And in return?" "Well," Richard hesitated, "you'd need to adapt your image, more modern clothes, a more appropriate presentation for the corporate world." The silence that followed was thick as fog. Helena finished closing her satchel and stood up, her hands resting on the worn leather strap. "Mr. Morrison," her voice was calm but firm, "what saved your daughter was not my appearance. It was my essence. It was the wisdom I carry in these skirts, the faith I learned from my grandmother, the connection to something greater that wears my clothes like a second skin." She took a step towards him. "You offer me money to become someone else. But if I do that, I'll stop being who I am. And if I stop being who I am, I'll lose the gift that just saved Isabella." Richard lowered his head, understanding the depth of her words. "But," Helena continued, her voice now softer. "I can make you a counteroffer." He looked up, expectant. "Let me teach you how to cook," she said. "Let me show you how to prepare food that nourishes not only the body, but also the soul." Richard frowned. "I can't even cook an egg." "No one is born knowing," Helena replied, smiling for the first time she entered the hospital. "But everyone can learn to put love into what they do." 3 weeks later, an unusual scene unfolded in the industrial kitchen of the Morrison Philanthropy Institute. Richard, wearing an improvised apron over his expensive suit, tried to peel potatoes under Helena's patient supervision. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, struggled with the simplicity of the movement. "Slower," Helena guided, her hands guiding his. "Feel the texture of the potato. Respect its natural form." "This is harder than closing an acquisition," Richard murmured, making Helena laugh. "Because you're trying to control the potato," she explained. "In the kitchen, you don't control the ingredients, you collaborate with them." Isabella, fully recovered, was sitting on a high stool, watching the scene with shining eyes. "Daddy, you're getting better. Yesterday you only peeled 2 potatoes in an hour." "Thanks for the encouragement, Princess," Richard said, smiling at his daughter. It was incredible how those weeks had transformed their relationship. He had rearranged his schedule to spend afternoons with Isabella, and for the first time in years, he felt truly present in the girl's life. "Miss Helena," Isabella said, addressing the cook who had become a constant presence in their lives, "can I help season the broth?" "Of course, my love," Helena replied, lifting the girl from the stool. "But first, tell me, what is the most important ingredient in any recipe?" Isabella thought for a moment, then smiled. "Love." "Exactly," Helena said, kissing the girl's forehead. "And you have plenty of love." Richard stopped peeling potatoes and observed the interaction between the two. In recent days, he had noticed how Isabella had blossomed under Helena's influence. The girl, who was once shy and withdrawn, now laughed easily, asked curious questions, and showed a joy for life he hadn't seen in a long time. "Helena," he called, his voice serious. "Can I talk to you?" She entrusted Isabella to the care of one of the assistants and approached him. "Of course. I was thinking about our partnership, about how we can expand this." Helena waited, curious. "I want to set up a conscious eating program for vulnerable families. Not just food donation, but teaching. I want you to teach other people to do what you did for us." Helena's eyes lit up. "That would mean a lot to me, to my community." "But there's one condition," Richard said, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. "You have to teach me how to make that miraculous broth, the one from the first time." Helena laughed. "That broth doesn't have a fixed recipe, Richard. Every time I prepare it, it's different, because each person who needs it is at a different point in their life." "Then teach me to feel what people need," he asked. "Teach me to cook with my heart." "That," Helena said, placing her hand on his chest, "you're already learning." At the end of that afternoon, as the sun set over the city, the Institute's kitchen was filled with aromas that told stories of healing, transformation, and rebirth. Helena had prepared a complete meal for the 3 of them, and now they were sitting at the table, sharing not only food, but also dreams and plans for the future. "You know," Richard said, tasting the rice he had seasoned himself, "I never thought I'd find peace in a kitchen." "Peace is not in places," Helena replied. "It's in the people we choose to have by our side." Isabella, her face smeared with tomato sauce, smiled at the 2 adults. "Are you going to keep cooking together forever?" Richard and Helena exchanged glances, and for a moment something passed between them. It wasn't romance, but something perhaps deeper. Mutual recognition, respect, and the certainty that their lives had intertwined in a way that transcended any logical explanation. "Forever is a long time," Helena said, smiling at the girl. "But today, tomorrow, and for all the days God allows, yes, we will continue to cook together." "And learning," Richard added, "always learning." As night fell over the city, the 3 remained at the table, planning the future of the Institute, dreaming of all the families they could help, all the children they could nourish, all the hearts they could heal through the simple magic of a meal prepared with love. Helena looked at her hands, the same calloused hands that had been scorned at a gala dinner weeks before. Now, those hands were seen as instruments of healing, bridges between different worlds, tools for social transformation. She had not changed her clothes, had not renounced her faith, had not sold her soul for money. Instead, she had found someone willing to learn her language, to understand her worth, to build something greater with her than both could achieve alone. And as she helped Isabella finish her homemade dulce de leche dessert, Helena knew that grandmother Antonia would be proud, because the true recipe for the miracle was not in the secret ingredients she kept in her satchel, but in the courage to remain true to herself even when the whole world insisted she change. The miracle was in the ability to transform humiliation into opportunity, to convert contempt into respect, to alchemize pain into healing. And more than that, the miracle was in the discovery that sometimes those who hurt us the most are the ones who most need our compassion. That night, as she put away her spices in the satchel that now held a place of honor in the Institute's kitchen, Helena smiled to herself. She knew that her work was just beginning, that there were thousands of Isabellas and Richards scattered around the world, waiting for a second chance, for a recipe of hope, for a broth that could awaken not only dormant bodies, but also hearts hardened by life. And she would be there, with her long skirts and unwavering faith, with her calloused hands and generous heart, ready to share the only recipe that truly mattered. The recipe for unconditional love, served without reservations, seasoned with compassion, and offered to all who hungered for a second chance. Because in the end, Helena had learned that true miracles do not happen despite our differences, but through them. And that sometimes the person who most needs healing is precisely the one who hurt us the most. Because behind every act of cruelty, there is always a wounded heart waiting for a moment of grace. The recipe for the miracle was complete, and its taste would remain in the memory of all who were lucky enough to taste it, reminding them that true love always finds a way, even when all doors seem closed, even when all hope seems lost, especially then.